Hey everyone, I hope you're well. So before I start this interview, I just wanted to check in with you guys for a second. For those that have been following me for some time, you'll know that a lot of my focus is genuinely on government disclosure, whether that be talking to military personnel, intelligence community, things kind of in that direction more so than others. Although I have tried to kind of bring a variation of different people related to the UFO subject on for interviews. So what I'd like to do is in the comment section below, if you could just let me know what type of interviews you kind of genuinely prefer, then I want to sort of see where everyone's head's at and see if I need to shake things up a bit. And another thing is that this interview is going outside of what I would normally do, and I'm doing another experiencer interview. So, I just want to kind of test the waters and see where everyone's at, the content they like to consume, and whether I can mix things up a bit. So, yeah, I appreciate you tuning in. And yeah, I hope you enjoy this interview. Thanks. Well, Deb, thank you so much for being here. Like I just mentioned to you before we jumped on, I'm trying to bring more experience of voices to this show. So I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Well, and I appreciate you asking me because I feel like that too. I feel like um, it's time for people to start listening to the ones who've had firsthand seen, been there. You know what I mean? To get the full, to get if you want to get the full truth, you need to talk to the people that experienced it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, your story is phenomenal. I've been looking and researching it over the past week or so, and it's really incredible the things that you've experienced. And so I'd like to just take it right back to the start. And I believe it was 1983. If you could kind of tell us how this all started, that would be incredible.
Well, it actually started long before that because I've had weird things happen to me. I'm a lifelong, as they say, person that's had experiences. My earliest memory is like six, but you don't have enough time for all that. The main experience that brought my family and myself to the forefront was the June 30, 83 incident that was written about by Budd Hopkins in Intruders. And I'm that Kathy Davis from that book, Intruders. That's the pseudonym he gave me. Um, I was a single mom. I was just newly divorced with two little kids, trying to get my life together. And I moved back home with my parents for a while so I could figure out my next moves. And one night I was getting ready to go help a friend cut out some patterns. She was a seamstress. I couldn't sew, but I could cut good. So she'd give me a couple extra spending dollars, to help out. And we got to hang out. She lived one street behind my mom's house, so it was convenient. And I was getting ready to go there one evening. As I was standing at the kitchen window waiting and washing my hands, I noticed a light coming out of the pump house swimming pool that caught my attention. At the time, I couldn't put my finger on why it felt weird to me, but in retrospect, I realize now the light was a different color than what a regular incandescent light bulb should have been.
Right.
But at the time, I couldn't figure it out. I'm just like, why is that door open? Why is there a light on in there? So I mentioned it to my mom. She didn't seem to be concerned about it. So I went ahead and left. A couple minutes later, decided that I would take a quick look back there just in case, not thinking about anything weird by any means. But my dad had a really nice big workshop back behind the swimming pool full of Indian motorcycles that he was restoring and Alpine Sunbeam race cars he was working on and restoring. And so there's a lot of money back there. And I was about ready to leave my mom with my two little kids because my dad was working second shift at the Ford plant down the street. So I decided to go back and take a quick look before I left just to make sure everything was okay. I didn't see anything. Um, I didn't see anything other than I did notice the pedestrian door to the garage that was attached to the house was now open. But rather than stop, I just went on over to my friend's house, which took like a minute, and I called mom to let her know. And again, she wasn't concerned about it. She says, your dad will take care of it when he gets home. Don't worry about it. I'll just lock the doors. I'm like, okay. My mom was not easily flustered. So when she called back right away and she sounded flustered, it got my attention and unnerved me a little bit. She called back immediately after I hung up and she said, I need you to come home right now. And I thought, well, this is weird. What, something is wrong. And my friend's husband was standing behind me and he heard that I was alarmed a little bit, and he said over my shoulder into the phone, "Tell her to call the police. That's what we pay him for." And she heard him and said, "No, I want you home. I just want you here." So I left, went back, stopped at the side of the house, and got out of my car, parked there at the side, and met my mom in what we call the Florida room. And I picked up a shotgun that my dad kept next to the trash compactor out there. And my mom says, that's not loaded, right? And of course, I knew it wasn't. It wasn't loaded because of me. I requested that when we moved back in with my little ones. So, but I said, they don't know, whoever might be out there doesn't know that. I can get close enough to go upside their head with them before they realize they're not getting shot.
Yeah.
And I always say that the fact that I went out there was weird because I was not brave like that. I was a lot more easily spooked. Now I would, but so I went out and looked around, didn't see anything, went back by the workshop just to double check the doors and windows and stuff. And on the way back across the property, under my dad's ladder truck, I found my dog, which she shouldn't have been under there. Should have been out of the garage, but of course the door was open. And I couldn't get her to come to me. So I just left her and went back around the swimming pool, across the yard, and down into the open pedestrian door. And while I was in the garage, I started to feel like I felt like I was on fire. I started to feel panicky. This panic swept over me. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I got to get out of here right now. And I headed towards the open doorway. And when I hit the doorway, something hit me in the chest, and like right in here. And it was so bright white and intense that it hurt. And it hurt my eyes, and I couldn't not see it. I'm quite sure my eyes were closed, although I couldn't move. At this point, I couldn't move, and I felt like I started shaking all over, and the intensity was so strong that I had no idea how long I was in this condition. I don't know how long this was like. I was like this. The shaking got so intense that it started to feel like almost a vibrating, and I almost felt like I could feel myself come apart, like molecule by molecule. It was so intense, and I remembered thinking, "Oh my God, I'm dead." And right about after I thought that, I heard this voice come from somewhere that said it was unfortunate that I had felt pain. And I felt some yanking on my arm, pulling down on my shoulder. And then the brightness suddenly waned, the intensity dropped off real quickly. And the vibrating and shaking stopped. I still couldn't move except for my eyes. But then I realized I wasn't in the doorway anymore. I was probably 10 feet or so out onto the patio, the cement patio. And I could see movement in front of me now. But at this point, it's dark out. It's dark outside. And it wasn't fully dark when I left to go do my friend's house. And I remember trying to see, and my vision had big splotches in them. And I don't know if you were ever a little kid, you used to swim with your eyes open in the chlorine pool, and then you would, there'd be halos around the lights and stuff. But I saw big splotches in my vision. I could see movement in front of me, but I couldn't make out a whole lot of detail. But I thought they were kids in the yard, and they were coming around from all over different areas of the yard. And I remember thinking, what are these kids doing in my mom and dad's backyard? And then I thought of my own kids. When I saw them, I'm like, oh my God, my kids are in the house, and something weird's happening. And my kids, mama bear stuff.
Sure.
And they all gathered up by where the swimming pool gate and fence and side drive met, and up in that corner. And then they all just kind of slid down towards me across this yard. It wasn't like they were walking; it just like they were gliding.
Okay.
And I'm watching them, and I'm thinking, what is happening? And then that's when I saw that egg-shaped thing to my left, out maybe 20 feet or so from where I was standing. And then I forgot all about them. I don't even remember where they went. I don't remember seeing them go in there or where they went. All I knew was when I saw that thing, I thought, oh my God. I didn't want to look at it, but I didn't want to not know where it was.
Right.
Like if it was going to come at me, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And there was a ball of light next to it about the size of a basketball, but it was softer and it was not attached to it, but in front of it. And it went down really slow to the ground and then came back up to where I'm 5'2", and it was probably about as high as I am tall, maybe.
Okay.
And I thought it was looking at me, but I don't know why. I don't know why I got that feeling. And then the next thing I remember is I heard another voice, but this was different, and it called my name. And I turn around, I can move, and I turn around and I walk towards the voice. And as I'm walking, everything I just described to you went away in my mind for the next couple of days. I didn't turn over to look at it or anything else. I focused forward, and I said, it was my mom. And she had stuck her head kind of out the kitchen door on the upper porch. And she said, is everything okay? And I remember saying, yeah, everything's cool. But I'm thinking to myself, what just happened? I feel weird. I kept thinking I feel weird. And for some reason, I wanted to get wet because I felt icky.
Okay.
So I called my friend and decided that her and her daughter were going to come over and swim instead of go over to her house and cut patterns. So they came over. We walked across the yard to the pool. Her daughter steps on something in the yard that makes her foot sting and then get numb. And then the numbness kind of goes up her legs. And so we got her out to the pool, and we thought maybe she'd stepped on a bee or something. We're looking for stingers. Didn't see anything. We were all in the pool, probably 10, 15 minutes, and all of us started feeling nauseated. And I was getting a headache, and I had, my eyes were burning, and I was seeing those halos really bad. I still had that splotchiness in my vision, like flash cubes, and I just wasn't feeling good. And so they eventually went home, and I went to bed. And when I got up the next morning, my eyes were swelled shut completely. So my mother took me to the emergency room. And normally in this country, there's not an ophthalmologist in the emergency room. But for whatever reason, I don't know if the guy was there visiting somebody, or what. But when they got me in there, they sent him in to look at me. And he asked Mom and I if I would mind going across the street to his office because he had better equipment there that he could give me a better exam. And so we did. We went over there. And after he looked at me, the first thing he said was, have you looked into the arc of a welder's torch? Or you been anywhere where there was an eclipse and you look in the sun? At that point, I didn't remember the bright flash. I just remembered something crazy happened, something weird. And I thought to myself, why are you asking me these questions? I'm not stupid for one. I'm thinking I'm not dumb, dude. I wouldn't do that. But it's like, why are you asking me these questions? No, I don't understand. He was worried that I hadn't had any symptoms prior to waking up, that except for right before I went to bed, my eyes were burning. And he, as bad as they were, he would have thought they bothered me a lot longer.
Right. And
that kind of bugged him. So I was given medication, eye drops and gooey gel stuff. And I can't remember for sure, but maybe he even gave me some oral antibiotic or something. I don't remember. It just seemed like a lot of medication. And it took several weeks for my eyes to fully heal up. But, and I will tell you, they were never right after that.
Okay.
And I'll tell you that in a minute. But, so like a day or two passed, then the whole family comes out and they, to go swimming because it's now going to be the 4th of July holiday weekend, and we're the ones that had the pool and the bigger land,
Yeah.
And all the kids came running back or went running out to the pool, and my oldest nephew comes running back in, and he said, "Grandma, what's wrong with your yard?" And Mom said, "I don't know what you're talking about." So, and I didn't either. So we all went out and looked, and there was that mark, and we're all standing around this mark in the yard. And then my mom starts giggling, kind of a nervous laugh, and says, "Oh, that's where our UFO landed the other night." Well, and when everybody was giggling, and then they went off and swam, and mom and I and a couple of the other adults were standing there just looking at it. And I thought to myself, why would you say that? That's not even funny. And then it hit me. I, I started to remember the other night. Pieces started coming back right away. It was like somebody just slapped me awake. And I looked at that mark. The first thing I saw was two big black eyes. And actually, I thought that came from a memory that I'd had in 78 when I was a new married young lady and had some weird gray guys with black eyes in my room.
Wow.
And that's where I thought that image came from. And all kinds of memories from that point on came back, sometimes nonstop for hours. I'd write things down. And one thing I had remembered was that I had picked a book up a few months prior to that called Missing Time, that was written by Budd Hopkins. And I could never finish that book because it was so crazy. And it made me have panic attacks really bad. And finally my mom's like, "You need to take that book back to the library because we can't afford to keep going to the emergency room thinking you're having a heart attack." So, but I did remember there was a place in the back where you could write to the guy if you thought you had that kind of experience. I had never really thought I had that kind of experience consciously before that. I thought maybe my sister had. I have a sister that's almost 12. She's 11 years older than me. And in 1965, she reported to us, the whole family, that she had seen a UFO over a church parking lot, and that when she woke up again, it was dark. She had taken my mom to a bingo game. She'd just gotten her driver's license, and she had taken mom to a bingo game. And big deal, she's driving now. Woo. And dropped mom off at the bingo game. And on the way back, she got this message in her head to pull in the parking lot behind the Holy Spirit Church. So she did. And she said when she got there, she put her car in park. She looked up. There was this big silver disc above her car and the next thing she remembered is waking up in her car. It's now dark, and it's now time to go get mom from the bingo game. So several hours have passed. So I always thought she would be the one that would have that weird stuff. So I told Budd about that in the letter I wrote to him. And then at the very end, so I kind of threw her under the bus because I didn't ask for her permission. Oops, but I didn't really care. She got over it. But then I said, "Oh, and by the way, this happened." And I told him about that night, and showed him pictures of the mark in the yard. The mark in the yard had about an 8-foot diameter circle. It had a 49-foot street coming off of one end of it that was exactly 2 feet wide, all the way down to the end where it ended in a perfect arc. The dirt was all laid, or the grass was all kind of a grayish beige color and all laid down. And the dirt under it was rock hard. There was a crack on one side of the circle. And I thought, oh, I'm going to see how far down this effect goes, how deep this crack is. So I had one of those little 12-inch rulers from the, school box.
Yeah.
And I stuck it down in that crack, and I accidentally dropped it, and it disappeared. So it was at least a foot deep, this soil, the way it was damaged. And from that point on, my eyes were never the same. I never wore glasses before that. And I suddenly became farsighted and was in, 2+5. Now I I was diagnosed with cataracts and macular degeneration in my 30s. And by the time I've been treated, the macular degeneration remains dry, thank God. My vision is slowly fading, but it's slow. It's pretty stable. But I did end up having to lose both of my lenses right before I turned 50, held off until I couldn't anymore. And so those are acrylics. And I can't prove that night did something to my eyes, but I know from that night on, they were never the same. Also from that night on, I started having They would water for no reason at all, like feel like I had glass in them. Um, I started getting like little rashes, and my glands on my neck would swell up and then go down. Intermittent low grade temperatures, stomach problems, irregular heartbeats, lots of anxiety, to the point where eventually I was diagnosed with PTSD by some doctors that Budd took me to at a hospital in New York City.
Wow.
I couldn't sleep at night. I felt like somebody was coming to get my kids. I couldn't go to the bathroom in the bathroom that overlooked that mark in the yard because there was a window there, and I kept thinking someone was going to pull me out of it. I also started doing other weird things like having these lucid dreams where I would see symbols and hear words and phrases and ideas. And I started taking things apart and putting them back together, and just all kinds of weird stuff from that point on started happening to me. And thank God that my mom and dad were supportive. And mom kind of had the experience a little bit with me. She saw the basketball sized white light, I found out later. Um, but eventually, after I wrote to Budd, he called, actually. He called and he spoke to me, and he spoke to my mom, and then he spoke to my sister. And he decided to investigate our case, because we had other things. Like I told you in 78, when I was newly married, I had seen that. And then my older sister in 65, and Bud's like, we've got some trace stuff here. We've got some potential evidence here. And then all this other stuff. And then we have other witnesses. He said, I think it's worth looking into deeper. One thing I would tell too is my dad had a ham radio tower back there in the backyard. He's a ham radio operator.
Okay.
And the coax cable and the mark in the yard was probably only about 25 feet from the tower. And the coax cable that ran from the tower down into the house, the plastic was intact, but all the metal inside of it melted all together in clump. And the transformer for the power that ran to the house that was over the pump house swimming pool, it blew up about a week or so later and had to be replaced. And just like all kinds of weird stuff like that started happening. Paranormal stuff started, or what people would consider to be paranormal stuff, started to ramp up in the house. I mean, it had always been a little weird there, but that started ramping up. I mean, there's just so many different parts to this whole thing. You know what I mean? And before even Budd came out, I was doing everything in my power to try to figure out what caused this mark in the yard. Why am I feeling so crazy? What do what do I see? What do I remember that maybe I'm misinterpreting something? This can't possibly be what I think it is, because it just doesn't make sense. And so I called the agricultural agent for the state of Indiana, trying to find out what things could do this to the yard. This soil, I did my own soil sample tests on it with a friend of mine. I took a control sample. I knew enough to do that, from outside the area. And then I chunked up a piece of that stuff in the middle there. And I put them in glasses of water for 24 hours. And when I went back, checked 24 hours later, the control sample was just mud, which I fully expected. But the soil from the affected area was still a rock. None of the water could get into it. And then in the fall, when the leaves started to turn, there was a patch of the small wooded area between our house and the next. One swath of the tree leaves from the sky down turned yellow and fell off weeks before the rest did. And that winter, our first several snowfalls, well, actually the whole winter, because we didn't have that heavy of a snow winter, every time it would snow, it would melt off of the mark, and the mark would be, so then I'd have like a crop circle in the snow of this mark, right? Now, the thing that I saw that night, the craft that Budd called it, was egg shaped.
Okay.
Really wasn't much bigger than the pump house of the swimming pool. The closest thing I've seen to it here, I never saw anything that looked like it until I saw the SpaceX Dragon capsule when they were pulling it up onto the ship to after they rescued those two astronauts. You know, I was like the rest of the country. I was watching, and when I saw the view down there, I'm like, I mean that looked more like what I saw in my mom's backyard than anything I've ever seen, even down to the two window things and the little square thing on the bottom. And except that my thing had like these skinny leg like things that came out of the bigger middle of it, because it was like it was kind of egg shaped, but it was sitting on its bigger bottom, and the smaller part was at the top.
Sure. Right. Okay.
And the pump house of the swimming pool wasn't that big. This thing wasn't much bigger than that pump house. And so, later on, I got to thinking, if those six kids I saw moving around the yard actually went in there and flew away from somewhere, or came from somewhere, that's not possible. Because even six little kids couldn't fit in that thing comfortably and do anything, let alone fly across the galaxy.
We do hear, I think what's funny with that is we do sometimes hear that UFOs are a certain size, but when you go inside them, they're actually completely different and they're huge and vast inside. So could that be a possibility?
Yeah, I'm sure it could be. It had to be. It had to be that thing was something other than what
Right.
I thought it was, or anybody, or Bud thought it was, because no way. There's no way. So I don't know what it was, but I know I saw it and I remember what I saw, but I don't know actually what it was. So we called it a craft for lack of a better way to describe it. But um, and then so after speaking with us for a while, Bud's like, I'm gonna. He asked MUFON if they would come and help him investigate in Indiana, but as soon as they got wind of the fact that I actually saw more than just a light in the sky, they were like, no, thank you. And at the end of it all, Walt Anders wanted no part of it, is what I'm told. So at the end of all of it, Bud ended up doing the investigation himself. So which that meant he came here. First thing he did after he interviewed the whole family was knock on doors, which my mom was like, "Oh my God, our neighbors are going to think we're crazy." But he found two witnesses to that night: the lady next to us and the lady right across the street from us. The lady next to us, she told him that night she heard like a loud sound, like an explosive sound, come from our backyard. Her television screen turned red. I think her phone kept ringing over and over, or something weird like that. And apparently she got really paranoid and thought something was coming for her, because when her husband got home and talked to Bud, her husband said that when he came home from work, he found her hiding behind the couch saying that somebody was coming to get her.
Wow.
Yeah, and we had no idea. I mean, we didn't talk to our neighbors like that much, And and then the lady across the street, she was a shift nurse, actually at the hospital where that I was taken uh, that next morning. But she said she was still in bed. Her alarm hadn't gone off yet, but it was almost time for her to get up and start getting ready to go to work. But she was awakened by what she thought was a jet sound, like a jet was ready to crash into her house. And her house was rumbling, and her power went out, and her clocks acted something about her clocks acting weird in the front part of her house. Well, her front part of her house is the closest to our house.
Right.
And so that and that was some other like corroborating secondary witness on top of my mom telling me like a week later, and she told Bud she couldn't remember at first why she called me to come home that night. Because remember, I told you when I went to my friend's house, she called immediately and said, I need you to come home right now."
Yeah. Yeah.
She couldn't remember why she called me for like a week. And then she remembered, and she said, "I was standing at the kitchen window and I saw a ball of light about the size of a basketball around the bird feeder back there." And she said, um, at first I thought it was like a flashlight beam of somebody out there snooping around, or that your dad had come home early. And it was like headlights from his truck. But she goes, "I couldn't see any of that. I was looking." And then she said, the light got smaller and smaller. And then poof, as soon as it disappeared, went in her head, call Debbie to tell her to come home right now. And so she did. She forgot, she didn't remember any of that until like a week later. I'm like, okay. But, it's just, if this had only happened to me, I would think I'd lost my mind. And I would, just like I said in the beginning, I thought there has to be a explanation for this. Some of the things that I had memories of from being when I was younger, I just told myself they were dreams because they made no sense, even though there was a part of me that knew it wasn't a dream, except for in 89 or 78 when I knew I was awake and I argued with my husband and my mom believed me. My husband did not. I was awake when those two guys came in the room with that black box. So,
And were those guys that came in the room in 78 the same as the guys in 83?
yeah, they were the little gray guys with the big black eyes. This time they had a little black box in their hand. When I first realized they were in my room, I sat up and I panicked and I thought, I thought, don't touch me. Just don't touch me and I'll be okay. And I was just, I couldn't breathe. And as soon as I said that, and I thought that or whatever, it stopped and I was calm. And I don't remember the whole conversation that I had with them. I don't remember how long they were there, but at one point they floated that box to my lap. And I said, what is this? Can I have it? Nobody's going to believe me. If it had a little red light in it or on it or like on top of it looking down. And he said to me, no, you can't have it. But when you see it again, you'll know what it's for and how to use it. And then he took it back. They backed up. They didn't turn around and walk away. They just kind of slid backwards, got real faint, and then they were gone. And then I immediately rolled over and started shaking my husband. I said, get up, get up, get up, get up. You're not going to believe what I just saw. And he would not wake up. And then all of a sudden I was overcome with just so tired and sleepy. I just slid down in bed and I fell asleep. But the next morning when I woke up, I remembered all of it. And I told him, I'm like, I tried to wake you up so you could see this. And he's like, what did you eat for dinner last night? Don't eat that anymore. He kind of laughed at me and it made me mad. And I'm like, pfft. I called my mom and I told her about it. And then, like everything else weird, I just put it in my head somewhere in this little shelf in the back of my brain where all the weird stuff goes that I can't figure out. And then Bud comes and he starts asking questions. And my mom's like, oh, yeah. He goes, has Debbie ever reported any other weird stuff? And my mom's like, oh, yeah. And she immediately tells him about the time I called her about this. So, this and the paranormal stuff started acting up, getting stronger around the house and things appearing and then disappearing and reappearing in different places. And one time we had a whole bunch of bees that showed up in my kids' room, like thousands of bees that showed up in their bedroom one morning, but they were all lethargic. We ended up sucking them up with a shop vac and taking them outside. Just all kinds of weird stuff was happening. Once this June 30, 83 thing started, everything just ramped up. I started, behaving kind of weird and doing strange things and having these thoughts come in my head that I would have to draw pictures of and write down in order to. I'm rambling. I know I am, but there's just so much.
No, there really is. That's the thing with this case that I find so it's extraordinary, the amount of different things that happened and the craft, the beings, the biological effects. And am I right in saying that the dog was affected by the biological effects as
Yes,
well?
exactly. Yeah, she had been out there that night because she was supposed to be in the garage, but the door was open and I saw her under Dad's ladder truck while I was out there. Her hair started falling out all along her back, and when it first started happening, we thought maybe it was mange. I don't know if you've ever seen mange on a dog, but it ain't pretty. And that's what we thought was going on with her. But it got worse and it started getting to a point where it was in spots that she couldn't rub off, and then she started developing these big black sores all along her spine and top of her body. Then we started noticing her teeth. She would be there'd be a tooth in her food bowl. Her teeth started coming out, and her eyes got whited over. You know, you can tell when dogs have cataracts, kind of like people, they get that like smoky look. Well, she got weaker and weaker to the point where she was losing a weight really bad, and we had taken her to the vet. We didn't have a bunch of tests run on her or anything. I mean, clearly she was dying, so we just had her. She ended up getting put to sleep, and I think it was in maybe September or October of that year after the June 30th. So and she wasn't that old. She wasn't that old, but she just went downhill really bad after that. And it wasn't, I started connecting her downfall to the mark in the yard, to my eyes, and all the other things that I started having problems with. Like I had no immune system for like a whole year. God bless everything that went through town I caught, every flu, every bug. But my fingernails are still real paper thin and they peel off and just weird stuff, right? Um, and I started, after a few years, I'm like, I hope I don't end up like Penny did.
Sure, I'd have been thinking that way. Yeah, frightened.
I try not to be. I have medical PTSD, because of all the stuff like that I deal with now that is weird. But I mean, I got diagnosed about 7 or 8 years ago with something called fibromuscular dysplasia in my renal arteries. It's where something in my body grows what the interventional radiologists called them spider webs. And they're strings of webbing that's made out of nerve cells, and they attach themselves to the inside of my arterial walls, and then they pull my artery closed like they're trying to kill me. So I've had one, I've had renal angioplasty. All they got to do is go in and break the webs open, and everything pops back open and works fine. But it's not fun before then. That's kind of rare stuff. And then I had the same kind of webbing stuff in my body cavity, like right where I was hit by that light. I ended up, like, in 2020, I had emergency surgery, and they found almost 40 different partial bowel blockages. And when they went in there, it was scar tissue adhesions that had doctor told my husband that literally had grown a net around my intestines and all of my organs, and they had to cut them all away. They went in and they cut away all 40 of them the first time, and then they had to go back 6 weeks later, and they found almost as many still again. This overgrowth of scar tissue in my body, in my abdomen. I can't. I don't. Even my doctor's like, I've never seen this, and I feel like, is it connected? I don't know. I can't prove it, and if I say anything to my doctors, they're just going to think I'm nuts. So it is what it is. At least I'm here, and they fixed it.
There you go. Absolutely. And during Budd Hopkins' investigation and you meeting him, did you ever go through any hypnotic regression sessions at all to see if you can pull back any further memories of missing time, of maybe even being taken on board the craft and things happening there?
I did. Now, people have to remember that this was 42 years ago. So there was no internet, there was no cell phones. All his investigation was done, either by me writing him or quick calls. And then I did go to New York two or three times. First time I sold my washer and dryer to get enough money to go because I didn't have any money. And then he came out to Indiana a few times. So I didn't have a lot of opportunities for a lot of that, but I did have that. First time I went to New York, I was actually hypnotized by a psychiatrist there named Aphrodite Clamar. Nothing. It was mostly just to give me an idea of what it felt like. And, I think maybe Bud was making sure I wasn't like, because he took me right from the bus station to her office before he even took me to his place, so.
And what was Bud like as a man and as a person, how did you find him?
I found him. He really cared, and he really wanted to help. I mean, I had reached out to this complete stranger, and I felt crazy doing that because that was out of character for me. And but he was very compassionate. He was very uh, he wanted to help, and he did everything in his power, and he was very smart, even, and he was an artist first, but so he wasn't a scientist or even an author, except he'd written Missing Time. But um, he found the right people. He made arrangements over the course of that 2 years. I think it was Columbia Hospital in New York I went to. It was some big hospital. Somehow he managed to either get financial donations or donations of time and use, because I didn't pay for anything, and I didn't, he did. He took care of all that. But I had a CAT scan of my brain, I had an EEG of my brain to make sure I didn't have some kind of epileptic problems or brain tumors or anything that would cause my behavior, or to the things that were I was seeing. Of course, that can't explain the witnesses and the mark in the yard and the other things, but um, and I had 6 hours of psychological testing, at both verbal and written, at the hospital there as well. And then later on in Indiana, he made arrangements for me to have something called a voice stress test, which was my understanding that was kind of like a lie detector test. And so I had that as well. And yeah, well, you know what the guy told Bud? He went into it blind. He had no idea what the questions were going to be. He didn't know who Bud was. He didn't know who I was. And Bud said he seemed a little bit shook up a little bit after the test when Bud talked to him. And the guy said to him, I can't prove to you that she saw a UFO or aliens in her parents' yard, but I can tell you that she believes she did.
Okay.
And Bud's like, that's good enough for me. I mean, that's all I needed to know. So, uh, so he crossed all of his T's and dotted all of his I's, for somebody that had to work from the 700-mile distance with no help, except for what me or my dad tried to find a Geiger counter with Michael Jim and track things out. You know what I mean? But um, he and he did help me. One of the things that he did was, he first off, when I first started to communicate with him by phone, and then would write him letters to tell him other things that I was remembering, um, he hooked me up with somebody, and I can't for the life of me remember her name now, but she was a lovely woman. But it was like a buddy system, kind of like in AA, when you get a sponsor. This gal was my sponsor. She was older than me. She'd had similar experiences to mine, and she had already processed them and was able to cope with them better. And so he connected me with her, and she told me, anytime, day or night, 24/7, you need me, something's going on, call me. And I did. Believe me, I called her a few times, and she was always there. And that helped. It helped to be around other people that were like me. And then a couple of the times that I did get to go to New York, I was able to be at his studio when and then be with, he had that support group kind of meeting that he had of the people in the area that would meet at his place and just talk about their experiences. And so I was fortunate to have been a part of that as well. And he took a lot of direction from Dr. Kumar, a psychiatrist there, and he used that to help me. Now, when I did have hypnosis, a couple of times when I've had hypnosis with him, honestly, I didn't remember anything more than I did when I went under. But it seemed like, maybe a couple of weeks later, I would suddenly remember something from 5 or 6 years ago. And I would say to my Mom, do you remember this? And my mom would be like, oh, yeah, I forgot all about it. And I'm like, I did too. But it was like, opening up something in me where I could remember. And I always said, when I did remember things, it wasn't that I didn't remember consciously that I'd had these or seen these things, but it's like I remember the car accident and I remember the two cars. But when I was under hypnosis, I remember what color they were and the license plate number. You know what I mean? I got more details that came out, but it wasn't the whole thing. And I've heard a lot of people who have a lot of negative opinion about hypnotherapy, and I understand it. I get it. It makes sense to me that people can plant things in your mind, I suppose, if you're susceptible to some things like that. I don't think I'm that susceptible. One thing Bud always did was he always recorded every session. So there's a recording of not only what I said, but what he said. So that's always, he's always done that. He even recorded the phone calls that we had.
Really good. And did he provide you with those? Do you still have those?
I don't have them, but they exist. I did recently get copies. They were lost for the longest time after he died, and I was told that my stuff had been destroyed uh, by his. You know, he had a rough divorce thing, but as it turns out, it actually does exist. I've recently found out, and they found 3 audio tapes of our first phone conversation, his first conversation with my mom, and his first conversation with my sister. And they, okay, 40-year-old audio tapes, right? They still worked. Those things should have been disintegrated by now. So the fella made them into digital copies for me and gave them to me. It was like a gift from heaven. And so now I know that there somewhere the audio tapes of our sessions exist, and it's just a matter of time before I'll be able to get copies of those. I didn't ask for any of that stuff when I was doing it because I didn't want it. That was his research stuff. Even the letters I wrote to him and the drawings that I made for him, I took pictures of them before I sent them to him, which I have photos of because I just wanted to keep them for myself. But I made those for him. I didn't ask for those back. I didn't want any of that stuff because it wasn't my intention to use it in the future. You know what I'm saying? The only thing I did do when he got soil samples and I got soil samples for him, I took some for myself because something in the back of my mind said, you should keep some of this for you. So I did. So I still have some 43 years later. Yeah. I mean, my parents have passed away now. That house is long sold, and this mark is healed up. So there's no way I could go get any more, but I have some. And for the life of me, I don't know why I did that, but I'm glad I did.
Absolutely. That's amazing. And then obviously, Bud, you're doing this work with Bud. When that kind of ended, did you stay in touch, or did you then start sort of become like what I suppose what I'm trying to get to is how you found kind of the UFO community as a whole and have remained in it to this day, kind of thing?
Well, I actually did not remain in it for a while. After when I took spells in my life. I mean, I didn't go looking for this. I didn't ask for this. I was traumatized by this when I began to realize how different it really was. Because when I was really young, I just thought this was life and everybody had this. And then when I had a little bit of ontological shock when I realized that wasn't the case, right? But I fortunately grew up in a whole family of people who had these same strange things. So it made it easier for me to assimilate into the rest of the world, I guess. And then I reached out for help with Bud when I felt like I couldn't handle it anymore. It was just so much, too much, and I was too at that point too terrified. I couldn't. I remember him showing me a drawing of a alien head that a woman in I think North Carolina had done. And he thought he was doing me a favor because this thing looked so much like what I drew. I thought it was my drawing.
Wow.
And when I looked at it at first, and he's like, "This woman in North Carolina, this is what she saw," and I literally puked. It. I was so upset because there was a little piece of my mind that was still telling myself, "Nah, this just can't be. You're mistaken." But then when I saw that, I mean, even the shadows were exactly like mine, and this thought came in my head: either that woman was in my head to see what I saw to draw that, or she saw the same thing I did, which means that's what you saw. You did see that. And I couldn't, it just was like mind blown. And then I just like physically got ill. But then, he realized that, he recognized that, and he helped me so much. Uh, when I finally uh, was able to uh, cope with it on my own better and deal with the anxiety part of it, and I went to therapy, and I went to therapy for anxiety, but I never told them for years and years about any of this. But I was still able to get the tools to deal with anxiety that helped me a lot. And then there were a few times when I literally I didn't want any more. I'm like, just go away and leave me alone. I have two kids to raise. I ain't got time for this shit. I didn't look for this. I didn't want this. I didn't ask for it. Go away. And then like when my late husband committed suicide, it's like, I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to see anybody. Leave me alone. And I would distance myself from it all for years and didn't want to talk about it at all. But something always happened to shove me back in, always. And the last thing that happened that really kicked me back into it was the Kokomo boom in 2008, I think it was. And at that point, I had become a move on investigator, because one of the ways I deal with things that scare me is to learn all I can about that. And in the process of that, I became an investigator for MUFON. Well, I was also a witness that night. So Jerry Severs was like, "Would you please be on this case? Because, like, you're a really good investigator and you were there." I'm like, okay. And that was it. People were bugging me to write a book, and because I keep journals of all the weird stuff and all the changes that have happened in me, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and consciously, even. And my experiences have gone from physical, like June 30 '83 incident, to more of like a metaphysical kind. Like, I'm having lucid dreams, uh, where I'm going to different places. And I feel like right now I have a job to do, and that's tell my story so that other people aren't afraid to tell theirs, and to help other people to understand that there's no reason to be afraid, because this is the way it is. Just all you need to do is realize that this life is all around you. It's always been here.
Yeah.
At least the things that I have been having contact with. I like that new non-human intelligence tag that the government's given them, because it feels more correct for me, because there's things I've seen that lead me to feel what I've had connection with, or contact with, has been more interdimensional than extraterrestrial.
Interesting. Okay.
So, and the changes in the lucid dreaming, and the things that I've been having here lately are all, you know, I mean, that's how I've grown through it.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
If you were to go back there, if someone gave you the chance to go back and said you don't have to go through that, and it never happened, would you take that, or do you think it's been a positive in the long run eventually?
if you would have asked me that when I was 24, I probably would have said, "Hell yeah, don't just get it all, make it all go away." But now I'm 66, and I've lived this long life, and I've had all these strange things happen, and my mind has really expanded and opened up to the point where now I couldn't have reached this point where I am without that. So I gratefully accept it as a part of my life and why I'm here.
Right. Yeah. I can see that being understanding that for sure. What can you tell me about Intruders? Because was this a book and then a TV series, or was it just a TV series? I'm not too sure. But what can you tell us about that, and its portrayal of your experience?
Well, the book Intruders was written by Budd, and it's actually the story that I just told you, of the June 30 '83 incident, and his investigation and his findings and things through that. The miniseries was based on Intruders, and there are maybe one or two scenes in the miniseries that came directly from the book. But for the most part, the miniseries was very Hollywoodized. Uh, that a lot of the people, the characters in the movie, and the experiences they had were actually compilations of actual other people and other experiences, and not mine, which at the time kind of annoyed me. But in retrospect, it was one of the first things done respectfully about this experience. And it brought a lot of mainstream people to the table who had never been aware of it before. And for that, now I'm thankful that Tracy did the way he did, what he did to get it. He had to do that to get it out there, because, networks and all, they require a certain amount of sensationalism and all that jazz back then. Now it's a little, I think it's a little more It's a little better now, but back then, to the fact that they even got something like that on network television, mainstream, and didn't have a doofy laugh track behind it or something, treated it respectfully. Mayor Winningham called me twice for the two scenes that came out of the book because she wanted to make sure that she was going to do them the correct way to be respectful of me, which meant the it meant everything to me. I was shocked and very thankful. So
Wonderful. That is incredible. That's really good to hear because, that was a time when stigma, it was just, you couldn't say UFOs without the ridicule and people laughing at you. Do you think have you seen that weighing off over the years on the subject in general? Do you think we're in a better place now?
we're definitely in a better place. I mean, it's still out there, and there are people. My concern now is for the scientists and the scholars and the military folks that are still afraid of losing their tenure, losing their position, losing their retirement, their pensions, or their jobs, because there's still a lot of stigma with that. For somebody like me, I worked in a factory for 15 years and as a hairdresser, and all kinds of odd jobs. It's not that, it ain't that deep, as I should say. But those guys have a lot more to lose. But I think it's loosening up for them. I'm hoping that even a tiny little bit of what I do out in public, can help them in some way. I want to present my story in a way that people make it make sense, and that they understand, but they also understand that I'm just a regular person, and I just try to live my life as normally as I can. I didn't go out looking for this stuff, but it's there. This is a part of our world that we got to acknowledge it. And there are a million people out there just like me that have never told their story, but hopefully they will eventually.
Hopefully. And, I think we hear more and more, like it seems that UFO sightings have been ramping up a lot in the last couple of decades, or maybe even the last three or four, since kind of the 80s. But we don't hear about so many modern instances of abduction cases, or cases that kind of have the kind of aspects like yours did. Do you think they're still happening and we're just not hearing about them?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I get it's not happening to me anymore, but maybe they've got what they needed and now they're moving on to something else. I don't know. I have heard other people talk about having recent abductions. I don't know if we're just not hearing from them as much. Uh, it's very traumatic in the beginning for people, and sometimes that's hard. It makes it hard to talk about. I'm lucky. I had family that supported me, and friends and coworkers, because they all saw it happen around me and they had it happen with me. So I was fortunate in that way. So I've kind of tried to pay it forward by being, I don't really give two shits what people think of me anymore. If they don't believe me, that's fine. I wouldn't either if I hadn't seen it. I'm as skeptical as the next guy. So I don't really care what people think about me anymore. So I guess that's where
That's a really good way of being. I really appreciate that, and I think that's great. And before I let you go, Deb, I think, like you mentioned there, that to anyone out there that may be struggling with talking or finding someone to talk to, what advice would you give them?
there are great places that you can reach out for. Thank God for the internet. You know, there's a group that I'm currently in. I go to Zoom, support group meetings with and stuff, called the John Mack Institute. Then you can find them on the internet. That's a great place to reach out for help and connect with other people like you. There's a ton of Facebook pages. I happen to monitor a CERO Midwest Experiencer Support Group page. They're out on Facebook. It's a private group, but and that's for your protection. And then Yvonne Smith has a big group out in California, also by the name of CERO. It's a great support group, and they have out of town and out of country monthly Zoom meetings. My suggestion to you is, if you're faced with these things and you're not sure what to do, reach out. There are people out there that are willing to listen. May not be able to give you answers, but can show you that we've been there and we are okay and you're okay. You can write to me. I have a website. I've had one for 20 some years. where people can write to me. And if you want to share your story with me and you don't want it to go anywhere else, it isn't going anywhere else. But I'm there. These are things I did not have available to me, and I'm really happy that it's available for people now. My website is debshome.com, DEBSHOME.
I will make sure that I link that in the description of the video and the audio podcast when that goes out. But I want to thank you, Deb, so much for being so open and so vocal, and helping to sort of break down the stigma and the barriers that we unfortunately still do face in this subject to this day. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks for letting me have an opportunity to speak. I know I talk fast, but I got so much I want to, so it kind of makes a little bit of sense.
Hey, people are here to listen to the guests, not to me. So I do appreciate you being so forthcoming with that information and the story. So yeah, again, thank you so much.
Thank you.